All right, good evening. Welcome to our interview tonight with Devin McMackin. He's a candidate for State House District 3. First, I'd like to make some comments about HULI PAC. HULI PAC was birthed from a shared drive to rework our system by seeking āina-based, equity-focused leadership for our Hawai'i Island community. Now more than ever, we need leaders who are willing to circle back to our roots and instill real change in our community, from Kona to Ka'u to Hilo to Hawaii. Now is the time to huli the system. Conducting our interview tonight is Michaela Cucci. Go ahead, Michaela.
Okay, well, first off, thank you so much, Devin, for being here. My first question is mainly just an introductory question. So please introduce yourself, explain what some of your core values are and why you've decided to run for office.
Mahalo. Thank you for that. My name is Devin Shaw Kealoha Pumihana O Kalani McMackin Sr. My mother and father are graduates here in Hilo. My mother from Hilo High School, my father from Waiakea. I believe my dad was like the second graduating class from Waiakea. And I always make fun of him for that, but it's only because I love him. I was born in California, in Fountain Valley, California, in '87. I lived most of my life, but I lived most of my life in California, but I lived a large portion of my childhood in Hawaii, specifically between Waiakea and Keaukaha. My grandparents were Keaukaha residents since, on the lease it says 1947, but I know my grandmother's father had the lease longer than that. And then had land from the older days prior to that. So my family on my mother's side has been here for a very, very, very long time. So some of my core values, I like to keep it simple. So simple would be, I have a family. I have 4 children, 2 of which live in the mainland and 2 live here in Hawaii with me. I'm married to my beautiful wife, Danielle, who is, always there for me, a good inspiration as a mother. I couldn't ask for a better partner, a better spouse. She keeps my head in the right direction and makes sure that I'm always on time to things. Some of my values reflect a lot of what I learned as a kid, what I learned even going through the military and being an adult, which is mostly ohana based, is family based. My children are the most important thing to me, besides my wife. So teaching them our values and teaching them, some will say Kanaka values, is more important to me than teaching them the value of $1 or teaching them the value of a fancy car, things of that sort. So I try to keep my kids educated on those things by teaching them how to give back to their communities, whether it's going hunting and whenever you get extra, you go and take out to the kapunas, or you take out to the auntie or uncle that's struggling, or the brother or the sister who's struggling. Go help with, clean yard, go help move stuff. And my kids always ask me, Dad, why do you always help everybody? Well, Dad, your grandmother, who's no longer with us, she passed in 2009. I tell my son, I said, well, son, Grandma said, you're too big to be unkind. So Daddy takes that to heart. So if I can help, I help where I can. And that's kind of where my choice to run was. So last election season, I ran against the incumbent for District 2. We were District 2 at the time, Mr. Christopher Todd. A wonderful person, may I add. He's a very good person. I wanted to see a little bit different response for our leadership here in Hawaii, especially for the demographic that this district, especially this newly formed district is taking on. So I feel and I felt that the Native Hawaiians, as well as the other lower demographics or the minority demographics here in Hilo, or however you want to call it, Keaukaha or Pane'eva or Waiakea, or even out to now it's including and encompassing all the way down to Eden Rock, just before Eden Rock. So Eden Rock back toward us in between the two highways. But however, that demographic is a lot different than what it was for second district. Second district was Waiakea, Uka, and downtown Hilo area, Hawai'i Island area, or Mokuola, and then down into Keauka and parts of Paneao. So now that we have a higher percent of Native Hawaiians, Filipinos, you know, and others of that same demographic, or even of different demographics, coming from white to Caucasian to Mexican to other ethnicities within the Pacific. So I think that they need a better representation than what was being offered. I think that the two running against each other in the primary, Ms. Shannon Matson and Mr. Christopher Todd, will be interesting to see. And I'll be very happy either or to go against either or. But yeah, that's pretty much my values is based on, you know, what I've learned as a kid, to do everything you possibly can for everybody, if you can do it. If no can, you know, like what is that Auntie Verna's saying, you know, if can, if no can, go Auntie Verna's. Well, you know, most of the time I'm the one with the phone call. Hey, can help me move this stuff? Hey, can help me cut this up? Hey, if you can get this, you know, oh, can help Auntie with this. And I have no problem doing that. And I think that if we bring that kind of attitude and that kind of mindset to statesmen, you know, bringing back that statesman style instead of just being a politician, I think that we'll actually find what we're looking for in people and finding what we're looking for in representatives. Sorry, sometimes I can be winded.
No, that's great. Thank you so much, Devin. That's awesome. My next question is, what are some of the critical issues that have arisen in the district that you will be representing that could be addressed by the state legislature? And how do you plan to address those issues?
I think the biggest issue that we have at the moment would be our roads. That's one really big issue that all of our areas have had, whether it's because of the volcano or whether it's because of just the lack of maintenance to the roads. And that's something that I believe the state in conjunction with the county, in conjunction with the federal government, can remedy very easily. I know that now it's been about 5 years since our road down to Keaukaha was dug up and cut off and whatnot. So it's good to see that the company that came in, that came in and is working quickly to resolve this issue. But I think that issues like that are going to come up every time if we don't start working together as all three conglomerate government organizations. And as a state legislator, I think that'll be very important to open a lot more doors and be able to work with departments and things of that sort. Whereas from the civilian side or the non-governmental side, it's very easy to close that door and not listen to the complaint. It's harder when you have a title behind it. That's one issue. Another issue I'd like to see is us going back to more āina-based educational standards. You know, at the PCSs, at the public charter schools or the immersion schools, there is a large amount of learning how my cousins and how a lot of my friends here in Hawaii say is, you know, oh, that's the kanaka way, brah. And I'm like, yeah, but what does that describe? How do we make that an educational standard, and why? So why is the most important part. I think that we forget that just teaching our children how to be consumers is not how to teach them how to live. If we can teach them how to plant ulu, uala, you know, different types of flowers and herbs, you know, olena, teaching them what the importance of these things are and why you need them on top of English, math, science, and things of that sort. You start focusing the children on how to be good people, not just good consumers. You know, we can depend on Safeway and Walmart and all that kind of stuff all you like, but you're just going to end up spending more money than saving money, and you're going to end up being in more debt and causing more troubles than that. Then I think that through the legislative branch, we can bring those type of that type of legislation forward to promote that style of living. On another note, in that same subject, you have you know, kids in Kilkaha don't learn the same way as kids in Paneewa sometimes. You know, kids in Paneewa and Kilkaha, they don't learn the same as kids in Honolulu or Lapuhoihoi or Kahuku or anywhere else. They learn different, similar, a little bit different because you have a different demographic. You know, children here in Hawaii don't learn the same as children in California. You know, so I always look at things as, oh, we're basing it off of what this study in California. That's great. That's all. My kite, wonderful. But what do California kids have a different outlook, different way of learning, different way of thinking than kids from Hawaii? You know, we raised different. We're brought up different. You know, even being a kid from California, I was raised different than kids around me in California. I had so many friends that turned into brothers. You know, that you just had all these Hanai brothers running around. And I had one sister, and my little sister had like 16 brothers, but she only has, you know, 3 biological brothers, but she gets 16 brothers all over the place, you know. And that's, you know, that's I credit my mother and my father for teaching us that, you know, the value of friendship and the value of you know, bringing your group together to do and accomplish something, you know. And I think those values are important when it comes to education, teaching the children these things and doing these things, as it leads them into more productive relationships, longer relationships, and whatnot. More issues such as in our area, we have issues with you know, water. There's a big issue with water. Kilkaha, I know, is piped in up until, I believe, Lyman. The street I live on does not have sewer lines, and that Kilkaha has been there for forever. So it's interesting that they still don't have sewer lines back to our back streets. So anything past Krause Street doesn't have sewage line. You go out toward past Paneewa, right? You go out into Eden Rock, Orchard Land, Ainaloa areas, same thing comes up, right? You don't have water pipes going out that way. Everybody stay on catchment, which is not a bad thing. You know, it's not a bad thing to be on catchment, but the options to be so, the options to do so are not there. I think that's important that we address these things, and through the legislative branches, allocating money to the counties and money to the roads, and will, how you say, alleviate that stress and that issues. That's a big thing. Another big issue I think we have too is energy, power. You know, we have these programs that bring in solar power and things of that sort. I'd like to see our work with the UH system to try and bring forth some hydroelectric power, whether that's, and I don't know, better be careful. But you know, hydroelectric pumps and hydroelectric systems within turbines within our downspout systems and things of that sort will alleviate a lot of, you know, because we live in the wettest place in the world, especially this district is so wet, so rainy all the time, which I love. Coming from a place that was in a drought for 13 years, California, you know, you see all the water, and I'm so happy about it, where other people are like, oh man, that's a lot of water. But we should be working through the legislative branch to create, you know, grant programs for new and reusable energy. Being in the Middle Pacific, it would alleviate our transportation issues when it comes to that type of petroleum products and things of that sort. If we're depending on more on electronical products or electrical reusable energy products to sustain us for longer. And you know, I think that's a big thing that we've already been working on with solar panels in the communities and doing solar panels. But I think there's much more than just solar panels that we can do for, you know, reusable energy. And the final thing I think is alleviating our brain fart right now. Oh no. Uh,
You're fine. No stress.
sorry. I have it written down, but now I lost my place on my notes. Um, oh, seeing our from the county to the state, seeing our, as we're trying to move to more reusable energy solutions, I'd like to see our counties and our state fleets, the fleets within their systems, meaning the vehicles that they have in their systems, moving toward electric, moving toward cleaner energy, moving our vehicle. If we're going to say we're going to do it, you got to start with what you can control. And if you're the government, you can control your inventory. Slowly start changing your inventory over from gas powered to electric to lead the way. You know, you want to call yourself a leader, you got to do it from the front. Leaders don't lead from the rear, they lead from the front, you know. So that's the biggest thing, is seeing that leadership change that over. And the only way you can do that is by bringing in that legislation to either boost that budget, or to come up with the legislation that we are going to move in the right direction. We got to stop saying we're going to do things and not do anything at all. So
skipping around a little bit here, you know, since you're discussing energy, I'd like to expand on that a little bit. There's recently been some legislation that favored firm energy over renewable energy. By firm energy, I mean burning trees and trash. They prioritize that over solar and wind. So I wanted you to address that. And then the second part of my question has to do with what your thoughts are on geothermal being considered renewable energy.
So for the first part, I think that if we're going to try and do something that benefits the āina, right, then I think we should move forward with it. If it doesn't benefit our āina and Kalahui o Hawaii, then ole. You know, if it's lining someone's pockets, that's not acceptable. You know, we should be moving to energy independency, not energy dependency. You know, I joked around with a friend saying, you know, it'd be interesting to see the government actually release funds to have everybody tied into the same battery system within the villages. You know, you can start with Hawaiian homestead places where we all have a community. Well, most homesteads have a community gymnasium or community center, and that community center or gymnasium can hold larger batteries, you know, instead of just having us to depend on an energy system or a power plant. We depend on ourselves to collect all that energy and share it out to whoever needs it within the community. I think that would be a very interesting thing to see with us being able to do that. And then the second part, I'm sorry, the second part of the question.
Well, it would definitely affect you in your district, using geothermal to generate energy. I
think Madam Pele has answered her question on that already. And if I need to elaborate, I am more than welcome. She says, ole. And when the land rumbles because you keep digging somewhere, you should probably listen and not keep going. As geothermal is a very good source of energy for some places, such as Iceland and things of that sort, in Greenland, you know, it's not proving as good for us in a sense, I think, based off of every time we dig, we accelerate her timeline for her to expand. So, you know, it's something we have to continuously look at the research, look at the demographics, and look at all the current evidence and information in front of us before we even try and move forward with that. But as of right now, I think we should try to be looking for different sources of energy at the moment. I don't think that we have the technological know-how or the respect for the āina that we should with using fracking and things of that sort, if that answers your question.
Thank you. All right. Thank you very much. Michaela?
Yeah, so my next question has to do with affordable housing, which I've read is one of your, major platform issues that you're running on and have a lot of insight about. Obviously, the increase in the price of living has driven a lot of locals away. What paradigm shifting solutions can you offer so that rising real estate prices and values do not correspondingly increase the cost of housing and cost of living, therefore pushing out locals from the housing market?
So when we speak of locals, a lot of people will assume that we're only speaking of Kanaka Oiwi. But there is a lot of locals that are from here, born here, raised here, second, third, fourth, fifth generation stay here. So if we look at it from that perspective, we can't always depend on, oh, well, if we alleviate the list on Hawaiian homelands, then that will alleviate the problem. That won't. That only takes care of 60 to 30,000. We have 1 million, what is it, 1.4 now, I think, million people living here. So to alleviate that situation, I think that we instead of building, for example, and I hate to put it this way, but I just noticed that today, instead of building new banks inside of our residential areas, we should be remaking new residential areas bigger, better houses, or even block areas where we're going. We're looking at places all over the islands that are not used or dilapidated or not being utilized to its full potential of possibly housing people that are in between homes or that need that buffer or a little bit of I hate saying handouts. I prefer the term hand up. If you get football, if you get cracked real hard, right, so you get tackled really hard, you want to see either a teammate or even your opponent reach out and put a hand out, right? Because you can't get off the ground sometimes unless somebody helps you up.
It's
So
a
I
little
think if we,
cool.
little kokua. So if we start utilizing, like our simple as like the military base that's sitting in Keaukaha, right? Yeah, a lot of people forget that the armory is right there. So in California, we used to have they used to call it Armory Night. In the place that I lived in, it was Fullerton. So what they would do is they would open the armory up, and they would have their medical unit come down, do medical screenings, dental, vision, things of that sort. They used to feed the people. They would ask for volunteers within the community to come in and feed people who are either not homeless, but even possibly struggling, to alleviate that. As for housing, I think that we can do a very big portion especially within Keaukaha, Panieva, of alleviating the list by opening the land up. It'll alleviate the list for Kanaka Oiwi, but it won't alleviate the list for the rest of Talahui here in District 3. So we got to work on bringing down the cost by figuring out other methods of building. I'm a carpenter. I'm a full-time carpenter. I'm a rough framer. I love throwing wood up. Love throwing walls up. A little nervous still on the roof. I'm a big guy. Being up on the roof, not such a good idea unless you want the whole thing coming down. Yeah, but I'd like to see new material coming out. I'd love to study about new material coming from hemp, new material coming from recycled plastics, new material coming from, techniques on how to build with concrete, techniques on how to build with concrete combined with steel, combined with wood. If we're not trying to come up with the most innovative way to keep these houses coming forward without bringing up the cost, where you have a lot of people that are just building houses and selling them, to people off island. They're not even living here full time. If we can come up with a government program that allows, besides Section 8, Section 8 is so down looked upon, but if we have something similar to Section 8 at the state level, bringing it into legislation to be able to alleviate some of those housing issues, assisting with the cost of living, bringing back our economics will be raising our economics to not just dependent on tourism. Our biggest issue, and because we have an issue with housing, is actually caused because we only follow, what did my mom call it? My mom calls it being doro, right? Like when you're being one doro, right? You don't put all your eggs in one basket when you're riding down the street on a moped. That's what my mom joked around. She used to say that, because what happens if you fall over? All the eggs gonna be broke. So give some to your brother, give some to your, put them in different baskets. So if only 3 eggs break, it's only broken eggs, huh? But the same thing for the economy. If we're not looking at multiple sources of income for our constituents. So for example, agriculture here on the Big Island, Maui, Kauai, right? We have some of the most fertile land on our island, right? That's why the sugar cane and the pineapples and the bananas chose us. It's because we have such fertile land. It's our duty and responsibility as representatives to try and bring that forward for those who live here, not for a corporation, but for those who live here, giving tax breaks and tax incentives and writing legislation for those things to local farmers, local producers, local meat growers, local hunters that sell at the farmers market, giving those people tax breaks. If we can start doing these things through legislation, we'll start bringing everybody home. You said it perfectly, and you said, how do we retain, in a sense, how do we retain our people from here, the local people? My parents are a perfect example of leaving in the 80s because the sugarcane left. My dad wanted to be a truck driver, and he couldn't get a job unless he knew somebody that was one truck driver, and it was most likely driving one cane truck, but they were leaving. So why would you get a job that you're going to be not having in 5 years? My mother wanted to be a nurse. All the jobs are taken at the hospital. All the jobs are taken at, Queens, because they were cutting, because they were losing an industry. So every time we end up with one industry as our leading for economics, we always end up on the bottom side of it as Kalahuio Hawaii. So we need to diversify our portfolio. And what I mean by that is stop just depending on tourism, stop just depending on agriculture, stop just depending on fishing, stop just depending on these things. Because if we over dependent on them, they're gonna get lost. One goes down, if that one thing goes down, like we saw during COVID, tourism went down, everybody was broke. Everybody was hurting. I was working with programs to try and feed the elderly through the Social Security, and going over to up Waikeuka over by this golf course. This auntie was in her 90s, and we knocked on the door. Me and my brother, who's my campaign manager in Namaka, we went out and we were delivering foods, pre-prep meals through a Social Security program for the elderly. So senior citizen program. It's like a Meals on Wheels, just not Meals on Wheels. Not trying to trademark. Anyway, but when you're looking at it, we had this 96-year-old auntie who came to the door and she was crying. I'm like, "Are you okay, auntie?" And she goes, what are you doing here?" And I was like, "Oh, we brought you food because somebody signed you up for this program, so we're just delivering food." And she was crying because she hadn't eaten in 2 days, because her caregiver, who was in her 60s, was on Oahu and she was stuck there because of COVID. So I never want to hear that. Like, I don't think anybody wants to hear that somebody's starving that lives right down the street from them. It breaks my heart. Like, I couldn't imagine, how did we let that happen? How did we let that slip through our fingers? And not as just community members, but how did our leadership at the time, our representation, let that slip through? Can you imagine if somebody never signed her up for that program? We wouldn't be talking to her. I wouldn't be talking about her. We'd be reading about her in the newspaper. So I'm just glad that those type of programs come along and they help out people where it needs. But that's a big issue that we have is food sourcing and things of that sort. But if we can diversify our economical standing, we'll be able to alleviate that issue where you're talking about people can't afford the housing, but they'll then be able to afford to live on either the lots in Kyokaha, Panievo, or be able to afford to buy their own acre lot or half acre lot or quarter acre lot or whatever it is, to be able to live a full life. I think also that roots back to my final portion of that question, which is we got to start teaching economics again, man. I remember my kid said, I asked my son, I said, son, did you learn how to balance checkbook yet in school? And he's like, balance a what? I said, balance a checkbook, son. And he said, no, why would I balance a checkbook? We got there's cards. There's cards. It's like, son, that's how you make a budget. That's how you make a budget, son, on what you're gonna know. And he goes, well, that's what I got you for, Dad. And I'm like, no, I already knew how to write a check by the time I was my son's age, who was going to be 10. And I already knew how to write a check, how to balance a checkbook, things of that sort. And they're not teaching that anymore. I don't see in his work and in my other children's work. I don't see that. I asked my nephews who are older, who are going through high school right now, who are in junior high school. I said, hey, do you guys learn about civics and economics? And they're like, why? I said, well, no, did you learn about this? Like, no, we don't need that. I said, what do you mean you don't need civics and economics? How are you going to know what your rights are? How are you going to know what the people are doing? And how are you going to know if they're doing it by the law? So seeing that come back, that will teach our children a little bit more responsibility when it comes to economics, their personal economics, their personal budgets, and learning, 9 to 5 is great. Like, I love my, like I used to work like a mule in California, working 72 on and 24 off, but that Monday through Friday attitude, is really ingrained, really ingrained in Hawaii. And if you want to keep that lifestyle, you better learn how to balance your budget.
Thanks, Devin. Next question, Mikala.
Awesome. Yeah, the story that you shared about that auntie, the elderly auntie, not being able to eat was really heartbreaking. So thank you for sharing that. I think that's very impactful. And while you were speaking, the words, pono kako e kokua ika lahui kept like playing in my head. Like, we have to do better than that. And that kind of segues into my next question, which has to do with land rights and rights specifically concerning Kanaka on this island. In your opinion, how can we best forge a path towards the restoration of occupied lands? And what does Hawaiian sovereignty mean to you?
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. For me, I am Native Hawaiian. My mother was full Hawaiian. I'm a member of the Royal Order of Kamehameha Kahi, Ea o Mamalohoa. If you don't speak Olelo, I am a member of the Royal Order of Kamehameha the First. My heiau is here in Hilo. Our heiau is responsible for Ka'u, Hilo, Wakea Uka, all the way up. So from Ka'u up to Mauna Loa, over across to Mauna Kea, down to Honaka'a area, Waipio. So sovereignty. Prince Kohio said it best. The kingdom still exists. And the kingdom still exists because its people still exist. Does not mean I'm not American, but does not mean I'm not Hawaiian. Hawaiian is a nationality, just as much as people would like to think it's an ethnicity. My great grandparents on my mother's side, on both sides, signed the Ku'e petition, disagreeing with the annexation of Hawaii. I think that if we work hard at righting a wrong as a representative, if that's what my constituents would like me to do, then that is something that I will be more than obligated, honored, and driven to do, because it's the right thing to do. I had this conversation with my father. My father does not agree with me on this subject, but which is okay because he has his own opinion. But I explained to my father, I said there was a wrong, and you have taught me, you as a man has taught me as a man, as a kane, that when you are wrong, you admit you are wrong and you make it right. So for me, I served overseas for the United States military, proudly so. It's a family business. My father was in, my brothers were in, my grandfather was in, my great-grandfather was in, my great-great-grandfather was in, all infantrymen. My great-grandfather, Big Mac, on my dad's side served in the 2nd Battalion, Ranger Battalion, that took Pointe du Hoc in Normandy. I think it's in Normandy. Pretty sure it's in Normandy. Anyway, that was the action where they scaled a cliffside with grapples and took a position because it was what they needed to do. Being a ranger is ingrained into us from way before. On my grandpa, on my mother's side, my uncle served in a field artillery unit based out of, my uncle Valentine served in a field artillery unit. My grandfather served in the 100th Battalion, World War II in Korea. I have multiple uncles, a lot of uncles, a plethora. Let's use a big word. Let's use a collegiate level word, a plethora of uncles with a plethora of personalities that served in Vietnam, all the way from Vietnam to Korea, all the way up to currently still serving. My uncle Kalani just retired after I think 43 years in the National Guard Reserves, one of the other National Guard Reserves. Which that meant he works too much, I swear. He's the only person I know that was serving in a unit in the military while volunteering for the fire department, while working a full-time job. And I'm just like, oh, but I think that the biggest thing I learned while being in the service was, excuse me, we're supposed to be champions. The Special Forces have Green Berets and Special Forces have a saying, "De oppressa libre," which means to fight for the. In short, it's Latin for. Oh, my brain is farting now, but it's liberate the oppressed. The Kanaka Maole, Kanaka Oiwi are being oppressed. Whether it's through economical oppression, whether it's through occupational oppression, whether it's through medical care, multiple things, education. For 100 years, we weren't allowed to speak our own language in schools. For 100 years, we weren't even able to discuss why not, you know. I heard a story about how somebody found the information on the Ku'e petition, and for all these things, it was just shoved underneath some other paperwork. And that's how me, as being a, I don't like to say half Hawaiian, I just say Hawaiian, just being Kanaka, that's how I feel. Is like we use just a pile of paper shoved underneath another pile of paper. And that's a wrong that needs to be right. As a state legislator, like I said, if that's what my constituents ask of me, even if it's one, that's what I will drive for, because I think it's pono. I think it's the correct path we need to take. If I have to recruit more members to do so because it's the right thing to do, you want to call yourself a champion, you want to call yourself the police of the world, then act like it. I've said this multiple times to other people within the order is, why do you wear that aha ula? Is it because you're ready to lead? Or is it because you want to be in a parade? You choose. Same thing goes for a representative or a senator or a governor, lieutenant governor, a mayor, county council member. Do you want to be a leader? Then you have to lead from the front. I have this saying stuck in my head, and it's always in my head, always in the forefront of my thought of Command Sergeant Major Beller. At the time, he was my first sergeant in the military, James Beller. He said, "Gentlemen, in a lack of leadership, true leadership will show itself. So if you can't be that leadership, doors that way." So I live to that, and I live by that. If I don't see the leadership that we need, then I guess, pull your britches up, tighten that belt, and get ready to get in the water, because ain't nobody else gonna do it, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, they call it.
All right, Michaela needs to take off, but if you don't mind, I'll stay on and ask you a few more questions. And
That would be great. Thank you so much, Devin. And mahalo nui
They call
loa.
it.
Mahalo nui loa no ko kako kuka kuka. This has been awesome. So thank you so much, guys. And I wish the best for you and see you guys later. Thank you so much for answering my questions.
Thank you, Michaela. All right. To ask you some questions about plastic marine debris. It's polluting our shorelines. It emits greenhouse gases and, of course, harms the coral as well. Would you support legislation to reduce plastic use and transition to a circular economy for packaging?
Yes, I would. I would do so by two parts. One is if we're going to have to use plastic, it needs to be, as I believe Auntie Laura was trying to bring something forward with that, registering it, seeing whoever's producing it needs to be registered with the state of Hawaii, because they're going to take on the bill. It shouldn't be the citizens that are living in the place. It should be the people who are selling the item that are that is causing, and they know it's causing it. Trying to hold them more up to a standard of recyclable, compostable, excuse me, not recyclable, but compostable plastics, so that way we have more of a what's the word I want to use? More of a permanent solution rather than a temporary solution, not a band-aid. I think if we try to, at the county, state level, try to implement, more stringent trash and dump use, meaning if we're going to complain about it that there's not enough people working at the dump, or there's not enough room for landfill. Okay, we shouldn't be using landfill anyway, so we need to utilize different technologies to sort our trash, whether that's putting the responsibility on the citizen themselves, the homeowner themselves, or the people themselves, to with blue trash cans, green trash cans, brown trash cans, black trash cans, taking that responsibility and getting that responsibility out there, so that way when we get to the dump, we're already sorted, we're already ready, and we can use whatever trash we have to create renewable energy as well. And I believe you called it
Fermented.
Exactly. I mean, if it's going to keep things out of the landfill, it's better for our āina than putting it more. And I think our landfill, if I'm correct, if I was reading correctly, I think our landfills are at capacity already. Like we can't stick more stuff in the ground, and I don't disagree. We shouldn't be sticking stuff in the ground. We need to find a better solution for it, whether that's selling our trash to somebody. I heard somebody said, we sell it to Sweden, or sell it to so-and-so. I'm like, yeah, I don't think it's gonna work out, because it costs a lot of money to ship that trash. That's a trashy ship, man. That's what that is. But I think that moving toward legislation that would remove more plastics out of our circulation. We did a great job with renewable bags and brown bags, but we need to do more with holding responsible for all those plastics that are still coming in and out of our āina. Whether it's finding and making legislation that we can only use compostable plastics, then that's what it's got to be. It's a step in the right direction. It's not a permanent solution, like I said, but it is a step in the right direction for holding accountability on people, and I don't know how many, I got to look at that later on, but looking even at the police departments for who's ticketing for littering, who's ticketing for things of that sort, because without any repercussions, is there really something stopping anybody from just throwing it on the ground? I mean, I teach my kids when we go to the beach, here's a glove, here's a trash bag. Everybody put the in the same trash bag, and we're gonna put it in the county trash. or we're gonna take it home if there's not a county trash. But everybody got to pick up 10 pieces of trash before we leave, whether that's paper, plastic, you know, whatever. I tell them don't touch cigarette butts, but paper, plastic, you know, that's something that my mother trained us to do. Is you guys not can leave. We're not gonna leave unless everyone want to get 10 pieces of trash, you know. So that's, I still hold my children to the same standard, and I still pick up trash myself. I'm constantly talking to people like, excuse me, hold on one second, you know. Pick up trash, and then what are you doing? I'm picking up trash. I like my place I live, beautiful. So you know, but I think that's the simplest answer I can come up with at this moment. And I know that there's a lot of senators and a lot of representatives at the state and at the federal level that agree with us on multiple sides of every lobby. So, yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about marine conservation. Tens of thousands of Hawaii residents actively oppose the reinstatement of the commercial aquarium trade that benefits really only mainland and international corporations. Do you support closing down this industry?
I support, if it's not local, you know, if you're gonna, there's no reason why you need to rape our reefs even more. Excuse my French. We already have enough with poisons going into the water and destroying the reefs. And a perfect example is Japan and China areas where they've overfished their areas. You know, if we constantly overfish our food, you know, we're gonna end up the same way as everybody else, hungry, starving, and unable to do anything about it. I was talking a story with a friend, a brother of mine, about, you know, some mo'olelo, some stories that were going around about one of the aunties. He was saying one of the aunties, he was in his class, they were learning about the reef and things of that sort, and fishing and stuff like that. And he said, this auntie said, well, you know why things are the way they are is because the fishing, the fishes and the sharks and the honu and all these animals are all wild again. And he said, again? He said, yeah. He said, if you think about it, you go down Minoli'i, hear the stories of the old timers down Minoli'i. They used to tap they would do a rhythmatic tap on their canoe. And all the opelu would come to feed. Still doing that today. You know, getting back to, and he said, and I hate to say it like this, but domesticating fish, you know, that's what you're doing, is you're domesticating them because they're answering it. But it's not domesticating to us. It's getting closer to our roots, getting closer to, you know, the kai, getting closer to the āina. You know, we're getting closer to our food source by respecting it, respecting life, respecting the sanctity of life. And so he's like, you know, love what teach one class about that. Get that auntie out here, teach that class, because you get all these kids go out there, go spearfish, go troll line, troll net. Oh, how come these uncles always go same place? Because they didn't need to sneak up on the fish. The fish came to them. You know, they didn't need all these special techniques because they already were trained themselves by their kapuna, you know, by their elders and their betters in a sense, right? So getting back to that kind of way of living and learning how to do and taking care of our reef would be a better solution than people raping our reef to and I said it again, I apologize. But you know, taking the fish from our reef because it looked nice in someone's aquarium. That's great, bro, but that's food for us, Hawaii. You know, like I'm not gonna fight you over food because you're gonna lose, you know, especially not in the water, bro. You're not gonna win in the water. So yes, bringing legislation forward to eliminate or decrease the chances of people stealing our fish within our ahapuahas and from our kais. Yeah, that's very important because, like I said, it's a food source. You know, it's a respected food source. So we don't need to overfish. We have the Pacific. You know, if we don't respect it, it'll go away, and we will lose our way of life. So
okay, thank you.
Does that answer that?
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, I appreciate your answer. One or two more questions. One is that I'd like to touch on is infrastructure. And there's
What
some,
infrastructure?
definitely some, yeah. So what are your top 3 priorities for allocation of infrastructure funding? In other words, if you were given a bucket of money and you could pick 3 infrastructure projects, what would they be?
I think the biggest thing within our area or our county alone is, well, besides medical, would be, like I said before, was with basic things like sewage lines, going back to those places that don't have sewage lines, water lines, things of that sort. I think our electric needs to be updated from what it is now. So those are two, three kind of. But a big thing that if I don't say it, my uncle Christian is going to be upset with me. Our public transportation system is appalling compared to other places, especially here on the Big Island. It's very hard because we don't have a real public transportation system. It's a subcontracted system. So the saying that my uncle said is, you could tell a society's prosperity by their public transportation. If their public transportation is inadequate, it usually means everything else is inadequate. So if you're building a house, you got to start with the foundation. And I think that would be 3 good places to start with: sustainable electricity, water / sewage, and a public transportation system that works. I don't think lots of people complain about it, and if they do, I don't think it really goes anywhere. But I think that's a big thing that we need to take on at the state level as well, is making sure that we allocate enough funding to support these systems, because not everybody can drive. Not everybody drives a car. At this point, not everybody can afford to drive a car. So what can they depend on to get to their jobs in Kona or Waimea or Hapuna or excuse me, or Punaluu, or wherever they're working at? Where can they depend on that they don't have to get up at 3:30 in the morning to make it to the bus stop? So they can, because the one that makes it on time is, you gotta be at the bus stop from Panieva at 2:30 in the morning, excuse me. So coming up with better transportation systems will alleviate 3-4 different fields. You're looking at the gas issue, you're looking at the public transportation issue, and you're looking at the employment issue. So that's the biggest thing, is I think that those 3 things would assist substantially. My next 3 bigs would be our hospital, excuse me, our healthcare system. Our healthcare system on this island is very limited compared to other places. And I think that if we can't update and retain current staff, meaning doctors and nurses and things of that sort, we're not going to have the right coverage for how many people we have. I think that the county and the state of Hawaii, when it comes to infrastructure, is stuck in the 1960s, 1970s, in my eyes, where it's set for the population at that time, rather than the population that's here now. So that whole thing deals with HUD, with housing urban development, with the current energy, with current water systems, with current transportation systems. All these things are so far behind, that we're stuck in time and we can't move forward. So it hurts our people more. We need to fix that. That's a big thing we need to fix. But yeah, bringing legislation forward to support those systems and the repairing and updating of those systems would be difficult, but not impossible. Does that answer the question?
Thank you. Yeah. All right. My last question is really kind of a social issue. Do you believe marginalized communities are well represented in office? And if not, how can we improve this?
Marginalized. Can you elaborate on marginalized for me?
Poor people,
Oh, okay, okay. So
minorities,
people that are impoverished, to more minorities, to okay. Um, Can you repeat that question one more time for me? I apologize.
you
I was
believe
stuck on
that
the marginalized.
that marginalized communities are well represented in office? If not, how can we improve that situation? How can we
No,
give them
no,
better representation?
no, I don't think that they are. Um, we were talking about it earlier, you know, not just Kanaka, but period. Minorities, impoverished. Because in poverty doesn't have a color. It doesn't have a race. It doesn't have a nationality. It is what it is, and it's horrible. And I think that yes, we do not have a good representation within government. I think that demographic, that specific demographic of how you put marginalized people are not represented. That's why they are where they are. Because in my eyes, if you, as a leader, you're not bringing your people up with you, you're not really leading them. You're just shepherding them in a sense. Well, not even shepherding. I would say you're just there for the paycheck. And you know, I don't think that if you want to be a statesman, not a politician, but a statesman, you're not there for the paycheck. You're there because it's what your people need. I think that the biggest issue we have, and it's probably going to get me in trouble for saying this, but is parties. Our biggest thing is parties. We now have representatives that are there because of the party instead of there because the constituents need them. You know, I keep on hearing this on the news, and I told you I'm going to probably get in trouble for saying this, but I keep on hearing the Republican president, Donald Trump, or the Democratic president, Joe Biden. And I'm thinking in my head, I understand that they ran as a Democrat, and I understand that they ran as a Republican, but as a kid, I used to remember when it was just the president of the United States, the governor of this place. There was no, because he wasn't there to represent a party, or she. They weren't there to represent a party. They were there now to represent the full body of their constituents. And I think we've fallen away from that, where now we have representatives and senators that are only representing one demographic of their constituency, whoever voted for them. And that is not fair to their constituents. Their constituents are their constituents, whether they voted for them or not, to make it clear. So having representatives from the community, because, for example, like myself, you know, I'm like I said before, I'm Native Hawaiian. I'm a veteran, which actually isn't a minority. Apparently, it's a very high population here on the Big Island and in Hawaii. We have a very high patriotism, I guess. I think it's just because we like fight, we like scrap. Yeah. Just kidding. But I think that we have a big chance here to see us learn more from our impoverished brethren and sisters and help them lift themselves up by showing them some leadership, creating more programs, because you can't understand what somebody needs unless you actually been through it, you know. If you've never seen the last can of Vienna sausage on the shelf, look at your siblings, your younger siblings, and go, I guess they're eating today and I'm not. And you really don't understand what starving is. You really don't understand what being hungry is, you know. Whether you're looking at, oh, well, we only get 1 bucket of water left, or we only get 1 gallon of water left. Oh, my baby sister and my baby Rod are going to be able for shower today, but I just gonna have to wait for tomorrow and we go get more water. You know, if you can't understand that, you're not going to understand what it means to struggle. You know, there's this dish that my mom used to make, because we didn't grow up very rich. You know, I didn't grow up very entitled, I guess. But my mom used to make, and it's the only thing she could make because she burnt everything else. But I'm sorry, Mom, I love you, but she couldn't cook. That's why we let Daddy cook. Anyway, she cooked this stuff. So it's like my grandmother calls it slumgullion, but it's like a goulash, right? So goulash, tomato paste or tomato sauce, some type of meat, some type of vegetables, and either elbow noodles or whatever kind of noodles you had at that time, right? In a pot. But the biggest thing is noodles, sauce, a meat source, right? Protein source. And so my mom would make this for us. She'd make a giant pot of it, and we'd have to eat it for at least a week or two for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And so I don't like goulash anymore.
I don't.
but I respected it because it was something to eat. It was something that filled my stomach, you know. It gave me a bigger respect for water, to drink water rather than, you know, drinking soda or drinking juice. We didn't have any of that growing up very much. And when we did, we're like, yeah, all right, treat, you know, like it was like going to the movies, you know. So if you've never been through the struggle, you don't understand what that struggle is. You won't understand what those people need. So what, you know, you got to get in the trenches to know what the guys need. You got to get in the trenches to know what's going on in the battlefield. And if you don't get in the trenches and you only show up for that one photo op, you're not doing your job. You're not representing your people. So I think, no, we're not represented as minorities, as impoverished people. And I think that more of our brethren and sisters would need to step up to the plate and start doing these things. And I think that I think that it's more of that frame of mind that we have is somebody else can do it.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah,
Or
it does go
time for
beyond
that.
impoverished too. It's LGBTQ, it's women,
Exactly.
there's a lot of people that are
And like I said, if you
underrepresented.
don't understand it and you've never been around it and you don't get in the trenches, you know, you'll never understand it because it's something you're not akamai about, you're not aware about, you know. And human rights, and that's what we're really getting down to the basis of, is human rights. What is the basis of human rights? You know, who decides what is human rights? Who decides what human rights I get versus what you get, or what my auntie gets, or what Tita gets, or my kids get? You know, everybody should be represented by their representative, whether they're an LGBTQ member, whether they're Hawaiian, whether they're Filipino, whether they're a mother, a father, a grandparent. Everybody, when you take on that seat as a representative, as a senator, or as some type of governmental elected official, you are not just taking on your voters. You are taking on the constituency. You are taking on everybody from the smallest kiki all the way to the almost oldest person in your area. And if you don't know what they need, you better get out there and go figure them out, you know.
Okay.
So yeah.
Thank you. Good answer. I'm probably going to get in trouble for going overtime, but I feel obligated to ask just one more question. You had mentioned that you were in the military, that you're a veteran, and I'm sure a lot of your constituents are wondering how you feel about the renewal of the military leases, particularly Pahakaloa, and what we should do with regard to the renewal of those leases.
So as a PTA, in particular PTA, it's out of my constituency because it's not in my district, but it affects the āina which my district sits on underneath, our watershed, our area. I think that the decision shouldn't have came from governmental officials. It should have came from the people who actually own the land, which according to the Hawaiian Homes Act, that is the beneficiaries of the Hawaiian Homes Act. And they didn't ask us. I know because I didn't get anything in my mail. I didn't get a phone call. I didn't get an email. So I was never asked. And I'm a beneficiary because I live on, I live in the homestead, you know. Uh, so I would know if if someone asked me, because it's not up to, I apologize for saying it so bluntly, but it's not up to the governor. It's not up to Mr. Ayla. They're supposed to be there to represent us, but they don't make decisions for us. It is our decision to do what we decide to do as beneficiaries with our land. So, and that actually helps with everybody else who's not benefiting from it, for a sense. I don't think that bombing our land is going to solve anything. I think we need to stop bombing our land. I think we need to stop training on our land. I think we need to find newer and better sources and better places to train. And with that said, I still believe that our military members, our military community members need to train constantly, but there is other ways of training besides blowing up things. And I know this because I was in the military and we did other things to train, you know. When it comes to qualifying on your weapons, yeah, we got to qualify on our weapons somehow, but finding another way of doing it, whether that's, you know, doing it virtually or doing it, you know, via a laser show, you know, like we had laser ranges at some of our posts and stuff like that, where you weren't shooting rounds off into the earth or rounds off into the middle of nowhere. You were shooting lasers at a screen, you know. But you know, which is it's a good source of training, but it's not a permanent source of training. There's nothing that can I'm fun at word, supplement the feeling of a recoil from a rifle, from your Howitzers, from you changing over, you know, your ammunition and things of that sort within your vehicle. If you're on a Bradley, if you're in a Humvee, if you're in a tank, whether you're on a plane. But you know, it really affects us here on this island, because, you know, like for example, I think PTA just got an expansion on their runway. A couple, I think last year, I think they expanded their runway, but yet I still have, and I live on Kraus. Kraus is butted against the airport at Hilo. My backyard ends at the fence line for the Hilo airport. Okay, so every time a fast mover or any type of jet from the military comes and they do flybys, my whole house hears it. Okay, my whole neighborhood hears it. Every time a C-130 or C-17 or anything bigger comes by, we hear it. And touch and goes. Why do you need to come down to the municipal airport to do touch and goes? You built something up there without asking anybody. You built something up there that is for that. You took tax money, we paid for it. Go practice up there, you know. And so it's a detriment to, you know, to our communities, especially the ones that butt against the airports, you know, especially the ones that butt against the impact zones. You know, it's all across the island. I can hear it, you know, and I myself, I have, you know, treatment for my PTSD. I've been to combat. So when I hear those specific ammunition going off, it does bring up bad memories for me, you know. But it also brings good memories because, you know, some of that was outgoing. But you know, but for me, it's more of those. Why are we doing that at our own house? You know, that doesn't make any sense to me. Why we're doing it at our own home. And second, it's our there is marais up there, nautical stones that were placed there by our kapuna, by our elders, that still have not been given access to. Anti Pualani was up there with some of the members of the order, looking at those rocks. They were given permission by the former commander. I can't remember his name now. I'm so sorry. To gain access to go look at these things, and those things had been damaged by previous units within the military. I think the military, I was in a sit-in on a Native Hawaiian Voices for sit-in for what they can do to alleviate some of the issues that they're having with the Native Hawaiians opposing using these things. And one of the things that we had suggested in this session, and it was earlier this year, I believe it was in February, could be wrong, it might have been April. I've been to a lot of meetings. But in this meeting, the colonel that's in charge, the lieutenant colonel that's in charge in there now, we had explained to him, well, it's funny that when you go to Korea, or you go to Georgia, or you go to Fort Irwin or Fort Lewis, or wherever you're going, everywhere else in the United States and outside of the United States, they give a cultural training class, right? But in Hawaii, we know more. How many cultural experts do you have here just on this island, And you're telling me you can't come up with something to train your incoming soldiers and outgoing soldiers to be respectful about where they're at? Very irresponsible. And the colonel agreed. And so he's created, he wants to get more together and things of that sort. But I think he's only here for another year before they rotate again, which without giving too much deployment and unit information, OPSEC. But we're looking at a big issue of why would you need to renew that? What are you holding back up there for us? There's multiple locations up there that have, like, for ads, where we have ad quarries over there for the heads of the stones that we use for our ads, for our carving tools, the koi, and then the marais. There's ahus up there that haven't been taken care of because they're sitting inside of a military protected zone that we know people have destroyed, but we're not given access to these places because of whatever reason. So that's something that we need to address. Well, if you're going to use it, then I guess we better get access to it. Considering that I am a beneficiary of the Hawaiian Homes Act, and you're sitting on 66,000 acres of it, so would be nice to be able to access our own land. In short answer, sorry about the long answer.
Thank you, Devin McMackin, candidate for State House District 3. We really enjoyed having this talk story with you, and wish you all the luck in your campaign. At HULI PAC, we're building something that the political establishment has never seen, a slate of Pono leaders. Your donation can help HULI the system. For more information or to make a donation, please visit our website, hulihigh.com, HULIHI.com. Thanks again, Devin, and have a great evening.
You too, sir. Oh, we will.